Sheltered in a bend of the Rio Grande in southernmost Texas, not far from where the river empties into the Gulf of Mexico, thrives a vestige of what was once a vast palm forest in a region now known as the Rio Grande Valley. The 557-acre Sabal Palm Sanctuary is owned by National Audubon Society and managed by Gorgas Science Foundation. Within the tract stands the historic Rab Plantation home built in 1892, which is nestled amidst the critically endangered 27-acre legacy native palm forest that once extended some 80 miles upriver and encompassed approximately 60,000 acres. As you stroll serene palm-shrouded paths of the sanctuary, you're whisked back in time, where primordial palm forest once stretched for miles along banks of the Rio Grande. With more than 3 miles of nature trails, some draped with gently swaying strands of Spanish moss, the sanctuary offers visitors a unique glimpse into the rich natural heritage of the Rio Grande Valley. This iconic palm grove and surrounding environs are home to an astounding diversity of wildlife, from colorful red-crowned parrots, rare speckled racer, and dazzling butterflies. In addition to fascinating wildlife, the sanctuary provides a glimpse into the intriguing history of the Rab Plantation home and saga of the once mighty Rio Grande. Rising as a clear, snow-fed mountain stream high in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, the Rio Grande flows some 1,900 miles to the Gulf of Mexico. The Rio Bravo del Norte, as it is known in Spanish, emphatically refers to the fearsome power of this once wild and mighty river. As the fourth longest river in the United States, the Rio Grande serves as more than a border between two countries. The river is the life-giving source of water at a cultural crossroads and a unique freshwater ecosystem. Some early Spanish explorers are said to have called it Rio de las Palmas, as vast groves of native sabal palms stretched far upriver. This once impressive palm forest has been reduced to 2 remaining stands, the 27-acre Legacy Grove at Sabal Palm Sanctuary and a remnant at Lennox Foundation's southmost preserve, both east of Brownsville along the river. Historically, annual flooding spurred by melting snow in distant mountains and periodic tropical storms and hurricanes created a lush alluvial delta with a subtropical forest in a mostly arid land. Once referred to as North America's second Mississippi, the annual spring floods spread across the lower delta, inundating some 60,000 acres of lush tropical forest that has now been reduced to mere remnants. In this early photo, taken after the Great Hurricane of October 1867, showing the damage in Brownsville, the image vividly captures a mighty river flowing past town. These powerful floods often resulted in the river changing course as it snaked across the alluvial delta, and some of these ancient meanderings created what are known locally as resacas. From the 1830s until 1902, a large fleet of shallow-draft steamboats plied the Rio Grande with cargo and passengers from Brownsville upriver some 80 miles to Roma. The Rio Grande steamers were often called mudders because of their shallow draft and how it allowed them to practically crawl across sandbars and river obstacles. These images depicting the end of Levee Street show several steamers moored to the bank, revealing Brownsville as a port city and gateway to the interior. Many times the Rio Grande has been a pivot point in North American history, and the Civil War is a classic example. Richard King, Charles Stillman, and Mifflin Kennedy made their fortunes on the river, particularly during the Civil War, running cotton for the Confederacy out to the Gulf of Mexico for export to avoid Union blockades. Brownsville became the last gateway for Southern cotton, and simply crossing the international river into Mexico put Southern trade out of the reach of blockading Union forces. When needed, steamboats just changed flags in National Registry and continued to operate. The profit was huge, and all in gold. Richard King went on to finish establishing the historic King Ranch, and Mifflin Kennedy the Kennedy Ranch, while Charles Stillman was the founder of Brownsville. Illustrating the complexity of the river's history while the Civil War raged north of the Rio Grande, a French gunboat with French Foreign Legion soldiers docked across from Brownsville as the temporarily French-installed Emperor of Mexico, Maximilian, fought Mexicans seeking independence. Even into the early 20th century, the Rio Grande displayed its force as a powerful river, but the Rio Grande was dying, with water increasingly drained for agriculture upriver. River steamers came and went, sometimes lasting only a short time, and today are known only by old photographs and fading scraps of paper in local archives. The river steamer Bessie was the last of its kind, finally ending its era in 1902, 2 years before the coming of the railway, and again it was not so much a victim of the new transportation, but indicative of a dying river. The vast palm forests were felled for construction and wharf pilings, and later cleared for agriculture, with the advent of pumping river water for irrigation and municipal use. Even before the arrival of the railroad in 1904, the fearsome Rio Bravo del Norte became so shallow it could no longer support steamboats. Now regarded as one of the most endangered rivers in the world, the Rio Grande continues to decline, suffering from overuse and pollution, with an ever-expanding population in two countries demanding more of a once mighty river that some years does not even make it all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Along the banks of the sluggish Rio Grande, Sabal Palm Sanctuary serves as a living touchstone, sheltering one of the rarest ecosystems in the United States, an ecosystem that once dominated the lower Rio Grande Delta, while also telling the intriguing story of the pioneering individuals who settled the region and the historic legacy of a once mighty Rio Grande in the fleet of riverboats that played such a key role in North American history. The sanctuary is located on one of the old Spanish land grants, known as Rancho San Tomas, and later the Rab Plantation. The imposing Victorian mansion, built in 1892, now serves as the visitor center for the sanctuary, and is a magnificent reminder of the river commerce that once flourished when steamboats plied the Rio Grande with cargo and pulled over to the landing behind the venerable residence. It was places like this that farming first took hold on the Delta in the 1880s, causing a rapid transformation of the wild Delta land, resulting in a transition from palm forest to one of the most intensely agricultural areas of the world. What was once considered North America's second Mississippi is now just a shadow of its former self, the slow pulse of steam engines pushing a river steamer against the strong current is only a distant memory. Looking at the river now, few even know this world of steamboats and palm forests ever existed. Widespread in Mexico and Central America, the northernmost reach of this once extensive palm forest, augmented by the annual floods, created an almost tropical ecosystem in the Delta, with the jaguar its apex predator. Today, jaguars no longer roam the forested paths. The last one killed near Omito in 1946. But the sanctuary continues to protect critically endangered plants and animals in a region where more than 95% of all native habitat has been cleared for agriculture and development. The Sabal texana, Sabal mexicana, or simply Sabal, is the only palm native to the Rio Grande Delta. Due to its location at the southern end of the temperate zone, the delta is home to a unique blend of tropical and subtropical species, from raucous red-crowned parrots to rare speckled racers. In this diverse region, the Sabal Palm Forest represents the last intact traditional tropical interface in the United States. Sabal palms grow as tall as 50 feet on a single gray trunk and forms a thick canopy of fan-shaped fronds that flowers from March to April, bearing delicate white blossoms on 7 to 8 foot long drooping stalks. The tree's fruit is edible and a favorite of wildlife, from red-crowned parrots to coyotes. The hardy native palms are freeze and fire resistant, but were no match for axe and bulldozer that felled all but the remnant groves along the river's southernmost bend. The 3 decades prior to the 20th century were transformational for what is now known as the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. Subsistence ranching and family farm plots, long the economic engine of the region, was giving way to an agro-industrial trend. Despite the lack of adequate transportation connecting the valley to the rest of the state, the growing population offered a market for some products. Primarily, expanded agriculture was made possible by two developments: the installation of lift pumps on the Rio Grande and the construction of gravity flow canals. Together, they enabled irrigation of a mostly arid region, and the arrival of the railroad in 1904 prompted a rapid expansion of agriculture for a national market. One of the first areas cleared for agriculture was what is now the Sabal Palm Sanctuary, and owner Frank Rabb was a pioneer in the rapid economic evolution of the valley just before and especially after the coming of the railroad in 1904. Frank Rabb, born in Corpus Christi, Texas, in 1866, was raised on a ranch and came to Brownsville to seek his fortune. He soon married Lillian Stark, granddaughter of ranching magnate Mifflin Kennedy and Petra Vela. This fortuitous marriage gave Rabb access to share 29 of the Espiritu de Santo land grant, consisting of 20,305 acres of rich land that stretched from the banks of the Rio Grande to the Arroyo Colorado. It was land that his mother-in-law, Vicenta Kennedy Stark, had inherited through her mother. The Rabb plantation, originally known as Rancho San Tomas, and later as Rancho de las Palmas, or Palm Grove Plantation, was part of the historic Espiritu Santo land grant awarded by the Spanish Crown in 1781 to José Salvador de la Garza, encompassing more than 284,000 acres, including what are now the cities of Brownsville, San Benito, Harlingen, and La Feria. The porciones, or land divisions of the ancient Spanish land grants, illustrated the importance of the life-giving Rio Grande as they were laid out north to south in extended strips connecting to the river. The Rio Grande served both as a transportation highway linking communities on two sides of the river while providing the only reliable water source for much of the region. In the 1880s, the porciones gradually became the hub of agricultural experimentation, and pumps brought from New Orleans altered the grip of a dry climate on the productivity of the region, and a land rush ensued, irrevocably changing southernmost Texas forever. In 1891, Frank Rabb, working with his mother-in-law, Maria Vicenta Vidal Stark, began work on the large two-story Victorian house that dominated high ground overlooking the Rio Grande. At the time of its completion, in 1892, it was one of the grandest homes in the region, making a statement of wealth and prosperity for 25-year-old Frank Rabb and his new wife. The Rabb plantation home originally stood on elevated land close to the Rio Grande, where it made a bend. However, in 1895, the river changed course, leaving the house a good distance from the river. Frank Rabb envisioned the rich delta land surrounding his mansion on the Rio Grande could be very productive, and began extensive clearing of the primordial palm grove. Sugarcane was one of the first crops grown, and later cotton. By the middle of the 20th century, cotton was king, and the Rio Grande Delta became the largest cotton-producing area in the world. Frank Rabb's vision of a vast agricultural enterprise became a reality, particularly with the arrival of the railroad in the early 1900s, which expedited a shipment of cotton, sorghum, vegetables, and citrus to population centers throughout the country. With increasingly more powerful pumps and the creation of extensive canal systems throughout the region, the once arid delta was aggressively promoted as a valley and a paradise for farmers, and by the early 20th century, almost all riparian river woodlands and palm forests were cleared. More than a century ago, Frank Rabb realized the uniqueness and value of the remaining native Sabal palm on his property. This was somewhat ironic, as this last 29-acre grove was one of the first places where the destruction and loss began. In January 1917, he offered 200 acres to the federal government for the establishment of a national park, but in the midst of the World War, this offer was not acted upon. The remnant Sabal Palm Grove was purchased in 1957 by Ben Vaughn of Corpus Christi and has survived primarily due to the stewardship of the Vaughn family. In 1971, the grove and surrounding land was purchased by the National Audubon Society. The palms, for which this sanctuary is named, is the largest and best preserved fragment in the United States of the Sabal Texano woodland, which once virtually blanketed this part of the state. In 2010, Audubon deeded ownership of the Rab Plantation House and 29 acres surrounding it to the Gorgas Science Foundation. Audubon also partnered with Gorgas to lease the entire 527-acre tract, which the foundation continues to manage. It is not just the palms alone that make this an exceptional place, as the sanctuary is home to many plants and animals that are rarely found elsewhere, such as the elusive speckled racer and tropical ringed kingfisher. If you want to see one of the rarest snakes in the United States, then Sabal Palm Sanctuary is the place to go. The speckled racer is a dazzlingly beautiful tropical snake that barely edges into southernmost Texas. They appear speckled as they sport an array of yellowish to bluish pearl-like spotting that gives them an overall greenish to gleaming black hue, depending on how the light plays on them. They are slim, agile, diurnal hunters that can disappear in an instant amidst the leaf-strewn forest floor. These non-venomous snakes rarely exceed 4 feet and prey primarily on toads, frogs, lizards, and small mammals. In addition to keen eyesight, they utilize a strong sense of smell to facilitate hunting. They prefer living close to a water source, where one of their favorite targets are the leopard frogs. On the sanctuary pond, the resident ribbon snake is stalking frogs, and maybe that is why this one is hiding beneath a lily pad with only its eyes peering above the surface. While a mature racer probably doesn't have much to fear from a similarly sized ribbon snake, a big indigo poses a serious threat. Racers can live some 10 years in captivity, but a lifespan of 5 is more likely in the wild, as they are preyed upon by other denizens of the sanctuary, such as snakes, birds, bobcats, and coyotes. And with the appearance of an indigo, the racer slips soundlessly into scattered palm fronds, littering the forest floor. On warm days, it is possible to spot several of these exotic snakes as you stroll pathways through the sanctuary. However, racers are a threatened species in the state and are to be admired and not handled. While the elusive racer is an exotic addition to the sanctuary's unique wildlife, the palm grove and surrounding environs are also home to a remarkable diversity of birds, from colorful red-crowned parrots to 3 species of kingfishers. This little green kingfisher has caught himself a fine fish and has settled on a favorite perch to savor his catch of the day. However, before he can enjoy his piscine morsel, a much larger ring kingfisher abruptly appropriates the snag. The ring kingfisher is the largest of the 3 species of kingfishers that commonly occur in the United States, at some 16 inches in length, with a massive bill in proportion to his size. For several minutes, the big kingfisher alertly scans the water for a potential meal to dive for, with his imposing bill gleaming in the early morning light. While his bill appears unusually long in proportion to his body size, his feet seem impossibly tiny. All the while, his glistening dark eyes intently watch for prey. Occasionally, he adjusts his position to pounce, and as kingfishers are apt to do, flicks his tail eagerly, anticipating an imminent dive. Suddenly, he plunges from his vantage, leaving the branch shaking with abrupt departure, and just as the diving board ceases quivering, the kingfisher returns empty-beaked. His next dive is more productive, as he lands with a small fish, but whoops, the tiny treat slips his grasp, and he stares downward, forlornly unable to locate his lost meal. So he shakes it off and will try again. Now he has caught something more substantial. He clenches the fish tightly, shaking it aggressively, and aligning it for an eventual headfirst swallow, all the while never loosening his grip, as he certainly doesn't want the big one to get away. Finally, after successfully subduing his quarry, he turns around, throws his head back, and downs the fish. Now that the king of the kingfishers has seized this prime fishing spot, it's doubtful the little green will return any time soon. While the little green kingfisher and the ringed are year-round residents of the sanctuary, the belted kingfisher migrates through every fall and winter to share the aquatic bounty of the Rio Grande Delta and adjacent resacas. Strolling shadowy paths of the historic palm grove with tropical calls of red-crowned parrots and occasional glimpse of a glistening racer, you slip back in time when stealthy jaguars strode past these same venerable palms, and the mighty Rio Bravo del Norte flowed wild and untamed. Frank Rabb died in 1932, and while he was a pioneer in turning the Rio Grande Delta into the agricultural paradise of the Rio Grande Valley, his later life wished to save a portion of the once vast palm forest he encountered in his youth has been fulfilled. The rarest and most distinctive native habitat remaining in the Rio Grande Valley is the iconic woodland forest of the Sabal Palm Sanctuary. Today, the Rabb Plantation home, palm grove, and surrounding native habitat preserves a natural and historic cultural legacy of inestimable value. Thanks to the National Audubon Society and Gorgas Science Foundation, the Sabal Palm Sanctuary provides students, teachers, and all visitors a chance to experience this unique Delta ecosystem, while also learning about the fascinating history of the region. More than 95% of the Rio Grande Valley has been cleared for agriculture and development, and despite this devastating loss of wildlands, the valley is one of the most attractive locations for eco-tourists from around the world who want to see the birds, butterflies, and unique wildlife of the area, many species which do not venture further north of the river woodlands. This wildlife tourism is of tremendous economic importance to the Rio Grande Valley. In 2012, a study by Texas A&M University revealed more than $400 million were spent annually in the four-county area by nature tourists, a figure that is undoubtedly much greater now. And no trip to the tip of Texas is complete without a visit to the Sabal Palm Sanctuary, a unique realm of inestimable natural and historic importance. While the economic value of the sanctuary is remarkable, the intrinsic value of exploring palm-shrouded pathways and immersing oneself in the region's rich history is an incalculable treasure.